I always thought my family was close-knit, especially my relationship with my sister, Erin. We grew up sharing everything: clothes, secrets, dreams. When I married Rachel, Erin was ecstatic. She became Rachel's confidant, and I thought we were the picture of harmony. But over the past few months, something had shifted. Rachel and Erin seemed closer than usual. It started with small things: whispered conversations at family gatherings, the occasional knowing glance. I told myself I was imagining things. Why would I suspect anything else? Erin was my sister, and Rachel was my wife. The two people I trusted most in the world. But trust can be a dangerous thing when it blinds you. The unease began to consume me. Erin and Rachel had always been close, but their interactions had taken on a strange new dynamic. They seemed to gravitate toward each other at family events, their heads bowed together in whispered conversations that would stop abruptly the moment I walked into the room. At first, I chalked it up to my imagination. Erin had always been a little secretive, and Rachel, well, she loved surprises. Maybe they were planning something for my birthday or the upcoming holidays. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. The turning point came one evening when I got home from work earlier than expected. Rachel's car was in the driveway, but when I stepped inside, the house was eerily quiet. I called out, "Rachel. You home?" No answer. I climbed the stairs, following the faint sound of laughter coming from our bedroom. My stomach tightened as I pushed the door open. Rachel and Erin were sitting on the bed, their heads close together, giggling like teenagers. When they saw me, they jumped apart, their faces flushed. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Nothing," Rachel said quickly, standing up. "Erin just stopped by to borrow a dress." "A dress?" I echoed, glancing at the open closet. Several hangers were strewn on the bed, but the scene didn't feel right. The tension in the air was palpable, the kind of tension you don't feel between two people with nothing to hide. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Rachel had gone to bed early, claiming she was exhausted, but I stayed up, my mind racing. I grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter, my hands trembling as I unlocked it. I wasn't proud of snooping, but I needed answers. I scrolled through her messages, searching for anything that would ease my suspicions. Most of the chats were mundane, conversations with coworkers, updates from friends. But then I found the thread with Erin. The messages were vague, but the tone was unmistakable. "I can't stop thinking about earlier. We have to be more careful. I'll meet you at the cabin next time." The cabin. My parents' cabin, where we'd spent countless summers growing up. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. This wasn't just my imagination. Something was happening, something I couldn't ignore. The next day, I called in sick to work. Rachel said she was heading out to run errands, but I waited until she left before heading to Erin's place. I parked a block away, watching as Rachel's car pulled into Erin's driveway. They hugged briefly before heading inside. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind racing with possibilities. What were they doing? Were they laughing at my expense? Planning their next move? The thought of the two people I trusted most betraying me together was almost too much to bear. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked up to the front door and knocked. When Erin answered, her face turned pale. "Chris," she said, her voice shaky. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Rachel appeared in the hallway, her eyes wide with shock. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Why do I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't know the truth here?" Rachel and Erin exchanged a panicked look, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rachel said softly, "Chris, we need to talk." I stared at them, my pulse pounding in my ears. Rachel's words hung in the air, suffocating and heavy. "Chris, we need to talk." That phrase rarely led to anything good, and I braced myself for the worst. "Talk about what?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger and fear. "Because whatever's been going on here, it's not normal." Rachel looked at Erin, as if seeking her approval. Erin crossed her arms, her face a mix of guilt and defiance. "Chris," Rachel began, her voice shaky. "It's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. "Really? Because what I think is that my wife and my sister have been sneaking around behind my back." Rachel flinched, and Erin's expression hardened. "You're jumping to conclusions," Erin said, her tone defensive. "It's not like that." "Then what is it?" I snapped, my gaze darting between them. "Because the messages on Rachel's phone and the way you two have been acting don't exactly scream innocent." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rachel sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Chris, I never wanted you to find out like this." "Find out what?" I asked, my voice rising. "That you've been lying to me? That you've been sneaking around with my sister?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears, and Erin turned away, unable to meet my gaze. "It started months ago," Rachel admitted. "I was feeling disconnected. From you, from everything. And Erin, she was there for me." "There for you?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's what you're calling this?" Erin finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "It wasn't planned, Chris. Neither of us wanted this to happen." "But it did," I said, my chest tightening. "And now what? You expect me to just, what? Accept it? Pretend it never happened?" The conversation spiraled from there, each word cutting deeper than the last. Rachel tried to explain, to justify her actions, but nothing she said made the betrayal any easier to bear. Erin mostly stayed silent, her face pale and her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I trusted both of you," I said finally, my voice cracking. "You were supposed to be my family. How could you do this to me?" "I'm sorry," Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know I've hurt you, but I never stopped loving you." "Loving me?" I said bitterly. "If this is love, I don't want it." I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know where I was going, I just needed to get away from them, from the lies, from everything. I ended up at Jason's house. He was my best friend, the one person I knew I could count on to give it to me straight. "Chris," he said when he opened the door. "What's going on?" "Rachel and Erin," I said bluntly, stepping inside. "They've been involved." Jason's eyes widened. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" I nodded, the weight of the confession settling over me. "I don't even know what to do, man. How do you come back from something like this?" Jason shook his head, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "That's messed up, Chris. I mean, Rachel, but Erin. That's your sister." "Tell me about it," I muttered, sinking onto his couch. "It's like my whole world just imploded." Jason sat down beside me, his tone serious. "Look, you need to figure out what you want. Whether that's walking away or trying to fix things. But whatever you decide, don't rush it. You've been hit with a lot." I nodded, his words sinking in. I didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was clear, this betrayal had changed everything. The hours after my confrontation with Rachel and Erin felt like a blur. I stayed at Jason's place, sitting on his couch with a beer in my hand, replaying the conversation in my mind. Every word, every expression, every excuse, they all felt like knives twisting in my chest. "You want to crash here tonight?" Jason asked, breaking the silence. "Yeah," I said. "I don't think I can go back there. Not now." "Take your time, man," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "You've got a lot to sort through." When I woke up the next morning, the weight of reality hit me all over again. I hadn't dreamed it. Rachel, my wife, and Erin, my sister, had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. I checked my phone to find several missed calls and texts from Rachel. Most were variations of, "Please come home so we can talk. I know you're hurt, but we need to figure this out. The kids are asking about you." The mention of the kids sent a pang of guilt through me. They didn't deserve this. None of this was their fault, and yet they would be caught in the crossfire. I knew I couldn't avoid Rachel forever, so I drove home, my stomach churning with dread. When I walked through the door, Rachel was waiting for me, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. "Chris," she said softly, stepping toward me. "Thank you for coming back." "I'm not here for you," I said, my tone cold. "I'm here for the kids." Her face crumpled, but she nodded. "I understand." Later that day, Erin showed up unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing on the porch, her expression filled with guilt and hesitation. "Chris, can we talk?" she asked. I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. "I don't think there's anything left to say." "Please," she said, her voice breaking. I need to explain." Reluctantly, I stepped aside, letting her in. She sat down on the couch, twisting her hands nervously. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she began. "I know that doesn't make it right, but..." Rachel and I were both feeling lost. It started as us leaning on each other, and then... "Don't," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "Don't try to justify it. You didn't just betray me, Erin. You betrayed our entire family." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "And I hate myself for it. I want to fix this, Chris. I want to fix us." "There is no us to fix," I said bitterly. "You've made sure of that." Erin nodded, her shoulders slumping. "I'm so sorry, Chris. For everything." The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Rachel and I tried to keep things civil for the kids, but the tension in the house was unbearable. Every glance, every conversation felt loaded with unspoken accusations and lingering anger. Meanwhile, my parents got wind of the situation. Erin, of course, had told them her version of events, and they reached out to me, pleading for us to work things out. "She's your sister, Chris," my mom said over the phone. "This is your family. You can't let this tear you apart." "Mom," I said, my voice tight. "You don't understand. She didn't just hurt me, she destroyed everything." "But families forgive," she said softly. "We have to." Her words stayed with me, even as I struggled to process what forgiveness could look like in a situation like this. One night, after the kids were asleep, Rachel approached me in the living room. She looked nervous, like she was afraid of what I might say. "Chris," she began, sitting down across from me. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want to fight for our marriage, for our family." I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, sadness, and confusion. "How do you expect me to fight for something you threw away?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I know I broke your trust. And I know it will take time to rebuild. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could somehow move past this. But the image of her and Erin together kept flashing in my mind, making it impossible to imagine a future where things could ever feel normal again. The weight of Rachel's words lingered long after she'd gone to bed. She wanted to fight for our marriage, but how could I even begin to consider forgiving her? The betrayal wasn't just about her, it was about Erin too. Every time I thought about them together, the pain felt fresh, raw, and unrelenting. The next day, I called Jason and asked if we could meet. Sitting in his garage-turned-man cave, I laid it all out. Every detail of the betrayal, every ounce of anger and sadness I was carrying. "What the hell are you supposed to do in a situation like this?" I asked, my voice breaking. "She's my wife, Jason. And Erin, she's my sister." Jason nodded, his expression serious. "It's the ultimate betrayal, man. I don't even know what to say. But you've got to figure out what's best for you and the kids. Forget Rachel and Erin for a second, what do you need?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to pack my bags and never look back. But then I think about Noah and Lily. I don't want them growing up in a broken home." Jason sighed. "A broken home isn't just about divorce, Chris. Staying in a toxic situation can be just as damaging. But whatever you decide, make sure it's something you can live with." A few days later, Erin called and asked if we could talk. Reluctantly, I agreed. We met at a park, a neutral space where I felt less likely to lose my temper. "I know I'm the last person you want to see right now," she began, her voice trembling. "But I need you to know how sorry I am." "Sorry doesn't fix this, Erin," I said bluntly. "Sorry doesn't erase the fact that you destroyed my trust, not just in Rachel, but in you. My own sister." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I want you to know that I regret everything. Losing you, losing our family, it's the worst thing I've ever done." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that her remorse was genuine. But the pain was still too fresh. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I said finally. "Not after this." "I understand," she whispered. "But I hope someday, you'll see that I'm trying to make things right." That evening, Rachel approached me again. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. "Chris, I've been thinking," she said softly. "Maybe we should try counseling. Together." "Counseling?" I repeated, the idea sounding almost absurd. "Yes," she said quickly. "I know it won't fix everything, but maybe it can help us understand where we went wrong. Help us figure out if there's anything left to save." I hesitated, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to reject the idea outright, to tell her that no amount of therapy could undo the damage she'd done. But another part, the part that still remembered the good times, the love we'd shared, wondered if it was worth a shot. "Fine," I said finally. "I'll go. But don't expect a miracle." Her face lit up with a mix of relief and hope. "Thank you, Chris. I promise, I'll do whatever it takes." The following week, we had our first counseling session. Sitting across from each other in the therapist's office, the tension was palpable. The therapist, Dr. Harper, began with a simple question: "What brought you here today?" Rachel spoke first, her voice trembling. "I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, and I want to do everything I can to fix it." Dr. Harper turned to me. "And you, Chris? How are you feeling about all of this?" "Angry," I said bluntly. "Betrayed. Like the two people I trusted most in the world ripped my life apart." "That's a valid way to feel," Dr. Harper said gently. "Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and when it's broken, it takes time to rebuild. The question is, are you both willing to put in the work?" Rachel nodded quickly. "I am. I'll do whatever it takes." I hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on me. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm here. That's all I can promise right now." Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I attended more sessions. Each one was emotionally draining, forcing us to confront the pain, the mistakes, and the ways we had both contributed to the distance in our marriage. It wasn't easy, but it felt like we were making progress, slow, tentative progress. One night, after the kids were asleep, Rachel sat beside me on the couch. "Thank you for trying," she said softly. "I know I don't deserve it, but it means everything to me." I looked at her, the woman who had hurt me more than anyone else ever could, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected, hope. The hope I'd felt that night was fleeting, drowned out by the weight of what Rachel and Aaron had done. Each counseling session forced us to peel back layers of pain and resentment, and while Rachel was doing everything she could to prove her commitment, I wasn't sure if it would ever be enough. Rachel had been more open since the counseling started. She left her phone unlocked, shared her schedule, and made a point to tell me where she was going and who she was with. It was exhausting for both of us, her trying to prove she was trustworthy, and me trying to trust her again. One evening, as she was cooking dinner, her phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen out of habit. It was a message from a coworker about an upcoming meeting. Nothing suspicious. Nothing alarming. But my chest still tightened, the old paranoia refusing to let go. "Chris," Rachel said gently, noticing my gaze. "You can check it if you want." "I'm fine," I said, turning away. But I wasn't fine. The doubt was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. Noah and Lily were blissfully unaware of the storm raging between their parents. They laughed, played, and begged us to join them for movie nights. It was during one of those evenings, as we all sat together on the couch, that I felt a pang of guilt. For all the anger and pain I carried, the kids deserved a family. They deserved parents who could at least try to make things work. After they went to bed, Rachel turned to me. "You've been quieter than usual," she said. "Is everything okay?" I hesitated, then nodded. "I'm trying, Rachel. For them." She reached for my hand, her touch tentative. "I know. And I'm so grateful. I'll never stop trying to make this right." Erin, for her part, had distanced herself. She stopped coming to family gatherings, stopped calling. My parents kept urging me to talk to her, to repair our relationship, but I couldn't bring myself to face her. One day, my mom called, her tone pleading. "Chris, I know what Erin did was wrong, but she's still your sister. She's devastated over this." "She should be," I said bitterly. "She betrayed me, Mom. I can't just pretend everything's fine." "I'm not asking you to pretend," she said. "But holding on to this anger will only hurt you in the long run." Her words stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. Forgiving Erin felt impossible, but so did carrying the weight of my resentment forever. During one counseling session, Dr. Harper asked us to write letters to each other, letters we wouldn't have to share unless we wanted to. The exercise was meant to help us process our emotions, to put into words what we couldn't say aloud. I stayed up late that night, staring at the blank page in front of me. How do you write to someone who shattered your trust? How do you express anger and hope in the same breath? Finally, I started writing. "Rachel. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully forgive you. What you did hurt me in ways I didn't think were possible. But I see how hard you're trying to make things right, and I appreciate that. I want to believe we can rebuild, but it's going to take time. A lot of time." When I handed her the letter during our next session, she cried as she read it. "Thank you," she whispered. "For giving me a chance." Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I began to find moments of normalcy. We cooked dinner together, played board games with the kids, and even went on a few dates. The wounds were still there, but they didn't feel as raw. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rachel turned to me. "Do you think we'll ever be okay?" she asked. I thought about her question, about everything we'd been through, and said honestly, "I don't know. But I think we're heading in the right direction." Her smile was small but genuine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sliver of peace. The fragile peace Rachel and I were building felt like walking a tightrope, one wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. But the tension wasn't just between us, it lingered in the unresolved silence with Erin. Her absence had created a void in the family that no one wanted to address. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. The kids were playing in the backyard, and Rachel was upstairs folding laundry. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, and when I glanced at the screen, Erin's name stared back at me. I hesitated, my chest tightening as I debated whether to answer. Finally, I picked up. "Hello. Chris," she said softly. "Hi." I didn't respond right away, the sound of her voice dredging up a flood of emotions. "What do you want, Erin?" I asked, my tone colder than I intended. I miss you," she said. "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I miss my brother. Can we talk? Please?" Her voice wavered, and despite everything, I felt a pang of something resembling compassion. She was still my sister, no matter how deeply she had hurt me. "Fine," I said finally. "But not here. Let's meet somewhere neutral." We met at a small coffee shop on the edge of town. Erin was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "Make it quick," I said, my tone clipped. "I don't have all day." She flinched but nodded. "I deserve that. Look, Chris, I know I can never undo what I've done. I betrayed you in the worst way possible, and I hate myself for it." "Good," I said bluntly. "You should." Her eyes filled with tears, but she pressed on. "I've been trying to figure out how to make things right, but I know there's no easy fix. I need you to know how much I regret it. Losing you has been the hardest thing I've ever gone through." I leaned back, crossing my arms as I studied her. "You didn't just lose me, Erin. You broke our family. You hurt Rachel, me, the kids, everyone." "I know," she whispered, her voice cracking. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, even if you never forgive me." Her words stayed with me long after I left the coffee shop. Forgiveness felt impossible, yet the anger I carried was exhausting. It weighed me down, clouding my thoughts and keeping me stuck in the past. But letting go felt like betraying myself, like saying her actions didn't matter. That evening, I shared the meeting with Rachel. She listened quietly, her expression unreadable. "How did it feel?" she asked when I finished. "Confusing," I admitted. "I don't know if I can ever forgive her, but I don't know if I can keep carrying this anger either." Rachel nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Maybe it's not about forgiving her for her sake. Maybe it's about forgiving her for yours." Her words struck a chord, and for the first time, I began to wonder if forgiveness wasn't about letting Erin off the hook, but about freeing myself from the weight of her betrayal. The next day, my mom called again. "We're having dinner next weekend," she said, her tone tentative. "I'd like you and Rachel to come. Erin will be there too." I hesitated, my chest tightening at the thought of facing Erin in a family setting. But I thought about my mom, about the kids, about the life I was trying to rebuild. Maybe it was time to stop avoiding the inevitable. "We'll come," I said finally. "But don't expect a happy reunion." "Thank you, Chris," she said, her voice filled with relief. "That's all I'm asking." The family dinner was awkward, to say the least. Erin kept her distance, and I avoided making eye contact with her. But there was an unspoken understanding between us, a fragile truce, born out of necessity rather than resolution. As we left that evening, Rachel reached for my hand. "You did good tonight," she said softly. "I'm not sure I did," I replied. "But it's a start." She smiled, her eyes filled with hope. "Sometimes a start is all you need." The family dinner had been a step forward, but the journey toward closure was far from over. The fractures in my relationships with Rachel and Erin were still there, visible and raw, but for the first time, I felt like I had some control over how to move forward. A few days after the dinner, Erin called me again. "Chris, can we talk? Just the two of us. I hesitated, but something in her voice, pleading, vulnerable, convinced me to agree. We met at the park, where the kids played during our happiest days as siblings. Sitting on a bench, Erin looked more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I know I don't deserve your time, but I needed to say something." "What is it, Erin?" I asked, my tone weary. "I've decided to leave town for a while," she said, her voice trembling. "I think it's the best thing for everyone, giving you and Rachel space, letting the family heal." Her words caught me off guard. "You think running away fixes this?" I asked sharply. "No," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "But staying feels like pouring salt in the wound. I need to figure out how to be better, Chris. For you, for the family, for myself." I didn't respond right away, the weight of her words settling over me. Finally, I nodded. Maybe space is what we all need. Rachel, on the other hand, wasn't going anywhere. She continued to pour herself into rebuilding our marriage, attending every counseling session, being transparent about her every move, and showing me in small, consistent ways that she was committed to making things right. One evening, as we sat on the porch after putting the kids to bed, Rachel turned to me. "Do you think we'll ever really heal from this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "But I think we're on the right path." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached for my hand. "Thank you for not giving up on us." "It's not just for us," I said, squeezing her hand. "It's for the kids too. They deserve a family." Forgiveness didn't come all at once, but in small, unexpected moments. Watching Rachel play with the kids, seeing her effort to mend what she'd broken, it didn't erase the pain, but it softened the edges. I still had doubts, still felt the sting of betrayal, but I also saw the woman I had fallen in love with, trying to make things right. One evening, after another counseling session, I looked at Rachel and said, "I'm willing to keep trying. But this only works if we're both all in." Her face lit up with a mix of relief and gratitude. "I am, Chris. I promise." With Erin temporarily out of the picture, the family began to settle into a new rhythm. Rachel and I worked on rebuilding trust, not just for our sake but for the kids. Family outings became a regular occurrence again, and laughter slowly returned to our home. It wasn't perfect, far from it. There were still moments of tension, still nights when the memories of what had happened resurfaced. But we faced them together, one step at a time. Months later, Erin returned for a brief visit. She asked to meet one last time before heading back to her new life. Reluctantly, I agreed. "Chris," she said, sitting across from me at a coffee shop. "I've been working on myself. Therapy, reflection, everything I should have done before. I just want you to know that I'll spend the rest of my life regretting what I did." "I appreciate that," I said, my tone measured. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. We'll never be the same, Erin." "I know," she said softly. "But I hope one day, we can be something better." That night, as I sat on the porch with Rachel, I felt a strange sense of peace. The journey had been long and painful, but we had survived. Our marriage wasn't the same as it had been before the betrayal, but maybe that was okay. Maybe it was stronger in some ways, built on honesty and hard-won resilience. Rachel leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think we'll be okay?" she asked. I thought about her question, about everything we had been through, and nodded. "I think we already are."